I found out I wasn't who I thought I was at my sister's wedding reception, in a Cracker Barrel parking lot, wearing a bridesmaid dress the color of dried mustard. My grandmother handed me an envelope during the first dance, whispered, "Open it later, alone." I knew from the weight of her hand on mine that later meant now, and alone meant before anybody could talk me out of it. Before I tell you what was inside, let me back up. Because the envelope didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of 31 years of questions nobody would answer. My name is Callie Pruitt. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Harlan, Kentucky, in a white 2-story house on the edge of a holler, where the cell service cuts out and everybody's business eventually makes its way to the church parking lot. My parents are Gerald and Donna Pruitt. My sister is Shay. She's 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she has been the sun that everything in our family orbited. I was never the sun. I was more like the weather. Something my parents had to deal with, something that got in the way. I want to be fair. I want to give my parents the benefit of the doubt. I've spent a lot of years trying to do that. But facts are facts, and the facts of my childhood are hard to dress up no matter how much grace I extend. Shay had a bedroom with a window seat and built-in shelves that my dad spent a whole summer putting up. Mine had a water stain on the ceiling that looked like a dog if you tilted your head just right, and a closet door that wouldn't stay shut. I used to wedge a sneaker under it at night because the creaking scared me. Shay got braces at 12 and a car at 16. I got a second-hand retainer that never fit right and a bus pass. Shay's college was paid for. I applied for every scholarship I could find, took out loans for the rest, and worked weekend shifts at a gas station off the highway just to cover my textbooks. None of that by itself would have broken me. Families stretch money differently. Life isn't always equal. I told myself that over and over. But it wasn't just the money. It was the way my mother hugged me. Quick, careful. Like I was something borrowed that she had to be gentle with. It was the way my dad never once came to a single volleyball game in 4 years of high school, but drove 6 hours round trip to see Shay in a community theater production of Grease. It was the way they talked about Shay with their whole chests and talked about me like they were filling out a form. I have done well. I want you to know that. I'm a physical therapist. I own a small house in Lexington. I have a good man, Marcus, who I've been with for 4 years and who thinks I hung the moon. My life, by most measures, is solid, but I have never been able to shake the feeling that I was a guest in my own family, tolerated, managed, never quite claimed. I asked my mother about it once when I was about 24. We were washing dishes after Easter dinner and I just said it. "Mom, why do I always feel like an outsider in this family?" She turned off the faucet, stood very still. Then she said, "Callie, you've always been dramatic. That's just your personality." She turned the water back on and didn't say anything else. I didn't bring it up again. Shay's wedding was in September. She married a man named Todd from Pikeville who coaches high school football and has a laugh you can hear from 3 rooms away. Genuinely good guy. I like Todd. None of what happened was about Todd. The ceremony was at First Baptist, same church we grew up in, same pews that smelled like old wood and candle wax. I stood up front in the mustard dress, holding yellow roses, watching my sister walk down the aisle on my father's arm. He was crying. Full, real tears running down his face. He cried like a man watching something holy. I have one memory of my father crying. Just one. In 31 years. His mother's funeral. That's it. He didn't cry at my college graduation. Didn't cry when I got accepted to my PT program. But he cried walking Shay down that aisle like his whole heart was on the outside of his body. I looked away. Found a spot on the stained glass window above the altar and held it with my eyes until the feeling passed. The reception was at the Harlan County Fairgrounds. String lights, a bluegrass band, long tables with sunflowers in mason jars. It was beautiful, actually. I'll give my mother that. She knows how to put a room together. I was standing near the dessert table, eating a piece of wedding cake I didn't particularly want when my grandmother found me. Grandma June, my dad's mother. She's 78, barely 5 feet tall, wears her white hair in a bun so tight it smooths out her forehead. She moves slow but deliberate, and she held her purse in front of her with both hands like she was carrying something important to church. She stopped in front of me, looked up at my face for a long moment without saying anything. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small white envelope. My name was written on the front in her handwriting, careful letters, like she'd practiced. "I should have given you this a long time ago," she said. I kept telling myself it wasn't my place, but I'm 78 years old, and I'm tired of watching you sit at the edge of things. She pressed it into my hand and held on for just a second. "You were always the one I worried about. You were always the one I loved the hardest." She walked away before I could say a single word. I made it to the parking lot, sat in my car with the door open and the sound of the bluegrass band coming faint through the fairground walls. My hands were shaking. I don't know why I knew, before I even opened it, that whatever was inside was going to change the math of my whole life. I just knew. Inside was a single folded piece of paper and a photograph. The photograph was old, worn soft at the corners. It showed a young woman I didn't recognize, early 20s maybe, with dark wavy hair and my exact nose, and the way I hold my mouth when I'm trying not to cry. Written on the back in pencil, "Rosalie, 1991. The note was in Grandma June's handwriting, 3 paragraphs. I'm going to tell you what it said, but I'm going to tell it in my own words because reading it back still takes something from me. It said that in 1991, my father had a relationship with a woman named Rosalie Combs before he and my mother were married. It said that when my parents did get married in 1992, my mother was already expecting Shay. And it said that in 1993, when my mother found out she was pregnant with me, she already knew, or strongly believed, that my father was not my biological father, that I belonged to someone else. A man named David Combs, Rosalie's younger brother, who had left Harlan County by then, and who my mother had a brief, terrible period with during a separation from my father. Grandma June said she had suspected it my whole life, said I didn't look like a Pruitt, said she'd watched my parents treat me the way people treat something that reminds them of a mistake they'd rather forget. She said she was sorry. She said that was not an excuse. She said she wanted me to know before any more years passed that I deserved to understand why. At the bottom she'd written, "David Combs lives in Moorhead now, retired school teacher, never married. I believe he doesn't know you exist." I sat in that parking lot for an hour. I did not go back inside. I texted Marcus. He was in Lexington 4 hours away. He called me immediately and stayed on the phone, not talking much, just present for most of that drive home. That's the man he is. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of me, and I made 3 decisions. First, I ordered a DNA test, not because I doubted Grandma June, because I needed it in my hands, something no one could argue with. Second, I looked up David Combs in Moorhead, Kentucky. It took me 11 minutes. He has a Facebook page he doesn't update very often. His profile picture is him standing next to a yellow lab. He has my jaw. He has my hands. I sat with my laptop and just looked at the picture for a long time. Third, I called my mother. I didn't tell her what I knew. I just said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough to answer the question before I even asked it. Then she said, very quietly, "Who told you?" That was it. No denial, no confusion. She knew exactly what I was asking. The DNA test came back 5 weeks later, 99.9%. Gerald Pruitt is not my biological father. By then, I had already talked to my mother, twice. Long, painful conversations where she cried more than she explained and explained more than she apologized. She said she had loved me. She said she had tried. She said she didn't know how to look at me without feeling everything she'd done. And so she had kept a kind of distance, a careful distance. And she knew now that it had felt like coldness. But it hadn't been coldness. It had been guilt, and the guilt had made her a coward. She said my father, Gerald, had known from almost the beginning. He had decided to stay. He had decided to raise me. But he had never fully been able to close the door on what I represented. And so he had left it cracked open, and a draft had come through my whole life. I heard her. I did. But hearing is not the same as forgiving. And forgiving is not something that happens in a phone call. I reached out to David Combs on a Wednesday morning in October, wrote him a message, kept it plain, said who I was, said what I had learned, said I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but that I felt he deserved to know I existed. He replied in 4 hours, said he needed a minute to collect himself, said he'd suspected something once, a long time ago, and had told himself he was being paranoid, said he would very much like to talk whenever I was ready, if I was ready. We talked on the phone for 2 hours. He cried twice. I cried once. He told me he loved teaching high school history for 30 years and that his yellow lab's name was Walter. He told me he'd always wanted kids, and the wanting had eventually quieted but never fully stopped. He asked me what I was like as a little girl, and I told him about the volleyball and the gas station job and the PT degree, and he listened to all of it like every word was worth something. At the end, he said, "I don't want to push, but I'd like to meet you if that's something you'd ever want." I said, "I think I would." It's been 6 months now. Some things are different. Some things are the same. David and I have had dinner 3 times. Once in Moorhead, twice in Lexington. He's quiet in person, thoughtful. He reads a lot. He brought me a book about the history of eastern Kentucky the second time we met. Said he thought I'd find it interesting, and I did. Walter the dog is enormous and completely without manners, and I love him unreasonably. Shay called me about a month after the wedding, once the news had worked its way through the family, the way news always does in Harlan County. She was not unkind. She said she didn't know. I believe her. She said she was sorry I had carried it alone, and I told her I hadn't really known I was carrying it until I wasn't anymore. She said she wanted us to be closer. I said I did too. We're working on it. Gerald has not reached out. I have not reached out to Gerald. There is a door between us, and I have not decided yet whether I want to open it or let it stay shut. Some days I lean one way, some days I lean the other. I give myself permission to not know. My mother calls on Sunday evenings. I answer about half the time. We talk about small things, the weather, her garden, a show she's watching. She doesn't push, and neither do I. It's not much, but it's honest. And honest is something I've been hungry for my whole life without knowing what the hunger was called. I hung a photograph in my hallway last month, one I printed from David's Facebook and had put in a simple frame, him and Walter standing in front of his house in Moorhead, squinting into the sun. I put it right next to my PT school diploma and the picture of me and Marcus at Mammoth Cave. Grandma June came to Lexington in the spring. We had lunch at a diner near my house. She ordered chicken and dumplings and ate every bit of it and told me she'd been carrying that envelope in her purse for 3 years waiting for the right moment. I asked her why the wedding. She said she looked at me standing at the edge of that room in my mustard dress, eating cake by myself, and she thought, if not now, when? She reached across the table and patted my hand, same way she had in the parking lot. "You were always the one I loved the hardest," she said again. "Why?" I asked. She thought about it. "Because you always looked like you needed someone in your corner, and because you always, always deserved one." If you've ever sat at the edge of a room that was supposed to be yours, if you've ever felt like a guest in your own family and couldn't explain why, I want you to know that the explanation might not be about you at all. It might have nothing to do with who you are. It might be entirely about what the people around you couldn't face. You didn't fail to belong. They failed to claim you. And sometimes an old woman with a tight white bun and a purse she holds with both hands will walk across a reception hall and hand you the thing that changes everything. Sometimes it's not too late. That's my story. A mustard dress, an envelope, and 31 years of questions that finally got answered. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Did you ever find out why? I want to hear from you. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe, because I'll be right back here next time with another one.